everybody, Deplorable Bobby here, and this is the way I see it. You know, I've had a lot of phone calls and some texts, and I've talked to some people over the last few days, and everybody seems to be worried about this death tax. I know everybody's heard about it. I've heard about it for years, and I never really knew what it was. And I had a friend call me, and one of their relatives died, and he was concerned that even though they had very little, that everything they had was going to be taken in taxes. So that prompted me to do a little research, and here's what I found out. Death tax fears are just a myth for 98.8% of all Americans. And I'm going to explain. Now, this estate tax, death tax, and the death tax also has in there a little clause about the gift tax. So it's all combined into one, and I'm going to try to explain that really quick, make this a short video. The estate tax is a tax on the transfer of an estate of a deceased person. Makes sense. The tax applied to all property transferring via a will, a trust, life insurance, and all financial accounts that the deceased person may have had. Well, you've heard the story. Well, give your kids or whoever you're going to give your stuff to them before you die. Well, that sounds like a good idea. You do that and you'll escape the death tax. But here's the kicker, people. There's another part of the estate tax called the inheritance tax or gift tax, and all transfers by gift will also be taxed. Okay, now here's where the rubber meets the road, people. The gifts are taxable are cash, stocks, real estate, and tangible and intangible property. Gifts are not generally taxed because each year an individual can give another individual, and it doesn't matter how many. If you have 10 people in your family you want to give money to, you can give it to 10 people. But it can't exceed $15,000, which is a lot of money to be given for a gift. Political donations, charities, and your spouse. You can give them $15,000 a year and never worry about it. But really, the truth of the matter is, people, this death tax, this estate tax, tied in with the gift tax, doesn't mean a hill of beans to you or me, the average person walking the street. Okay, for you and me, we have a personal exemption. And if we're above that exemption, we're taxed at 16.5% of the estate's worth. But every person of legal voting age is able to get $11.8 million before he's ever taxed on the death tax or the estate tax. Corporations, the top 2%, they're paying 40%. That's where the money's coming from, people. It ain't you and me. So if somebody, your father, your mother, aunt, uncle, it doesn't matter who, died and left you $2 million, well, guess what? You don't have to pay death tax on that money until you reach $11.8 million. Okay? So quit worrying, people. 2 out of every 1,000 people face the possibility of having to pay an estate tax. But 99.8% of all estates are non-taxed. It's a myth, people. It's like an urban legend. You know, estate tax threatens small farms, and it just isn't true to the extent that they're trying to make us believe. Out of all of our small farms in America in 2018, there's hundreds and hundreds of them. Only 50, or about 50, will owe any estate tax And that's nationwide, people. Nationwide. Remember, every individual in America has $11.8 million personal exemption. That's a lot of money, people, and it's staying in the pockets of middle America. It's the top 2% that are paying the 40% death tax. So y'all quit worrying about that stuff. And I've sit here and I've lost my paperwork and I don't know where I'm at. Here we go. As I always try to do in my videos, I try to mention our children. God save our children. God knows they're being exploited every day. And sometimes worse. I'm going to tell you a little story and I'm going to be done. This was just last Friday and Saturday. Alabama man charged with murder of 11-year-old girl. Here's what the police are telling us. Christopher Madison, 33 years old, held without bond on charges of capital murder of 11-year-old Amberly Barnett. She was strangled to death and her body was found about 200 yards behind Madison's house. You know, Barnett was originally arrested. It's real funny he was arrested so quick, but he was arrested on drug charges, drug possession. But as they investigated his drug possession charges and talked to him, they realized this guy had something to hide. And they questioned him further. And investigators soon realized that Madison's crimes were much worse than just simple drug possession. He was guilty of murder. So here's what happened. Amberly was visiting her aunt when she disappeared around 6 p.m. on Friday night. She always carried her phone with her like all of us do, especially young kids. I mean, that's their lifeline to the world, people. But her phone was left behind. That's a big check mark right there, big red flag. Well, Amberly was reported missing Friday evening. Her body was found around 6:30 a.m. the next morning on Saturday. People, this is another abducted child murdered senselessly by some perverted, evil, demonic, possessed individual. I won't even call him a person. People, pray for our children. They're being exploited every day in one form or another. I thank you for watching. I'd like for you to subscribe if you would. Meet me back here tomorrow night. This is Deplorable Bobby, and this is the way I see it.